Welcome to Diversity and Leadership Connect with Community, featuring the Hispanic Business Student Association, also known as Hbsa. I'm going to turn it over to our host and moderator, who is going to be kind of leading our session today with a group of people who just really brighten my everyday. These are folks I am incredibly honored to work with and watch grow while they're here at the GSB. So with that, I'm going to turn it to our host and moderator, Francisca.
Thank you so much, Will. You bring so much love to everything you do, and we appreciate it. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Francisca. I'm your MBA 2 moderator today. And so today we have a panel of Hispanic identifying students. And so I'm just going to have them go through, share their name, their year, where they were before GSB, and kind of where their hometown is. They're tied to the Hbsa, the Hispanic Business Student Association that we're representing, and their favorite thing about the GSB so far. So I can kick us off. My name is Francisca. I'm a second year MBA. My hometown I've moved all over the place, but my parents live in Guayaquil, Ecuador, but I was living in Vietnam before coming to the GSB. I am one of the co-presidents of Hbsa, and proudly a member of the community. My favorite thing about the GSB so far is obviously the cliche of the people, but just like so many people who really care about what they're doing. And I'm going to pass this up to Joe.
Thank you very much, Francisca. My name is Joe. I'm one of the co-presidents of Hbsa as well, along with Francisca and Francisco, who's also here. So I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, and then I spent some time in Los Angeles before coming back up here. I'm about as worldly as Francisca. She's traveled all around the world. I've traveled all around California. So equal levels of, sophistication in that sense. I'm also a joint degree candidate at the law school. So if you have, specific joint degree questions, I can answer them, at least in broad terms, about other joint degree programs. My connection to the Hispanic community, my mom's side of the family is Mexican. They're Mexican American. And I think my favorite thing, Francisca stole, I think it definitely is the people. GSB is my favorite thing, but just to not have the exact same answer, I'll also share that the people around me have inspired me to learn more about myself and grow in a way that I wasn't even on my radar if possible before entering Stanford. And with that, I will popcorn over to Omar.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Omar Garza here. Apologize if the audio is a little bit crappy. So Omar Garza, originally from Monterrey, from Mexico, but I moved to the States when I started high school. So I've been in the States for a while. Prior to coming to the GSB, I worked in oil and gas in the energy sector. I studied petroleum engineering at Texas A&M University. And prior to the GSB, excuse me, my favorite thing being here at the GSB, I think similar to everyone else, a little bit of a cliche, but I mean, the people have been amazing. I think there's a great sense of community. Everyone that I've met has been just very, very interesting, very warm, and wanting and willing to connect with everyone else. So I'm very excited about that and looking forward to spending more time here. And in case I didn't say it, I'm an MBA 1 and will be graduating in 2022. With that, I will pass it over to Francisco.
Hey, everyone. My name is Francisco. I'm one of the co-presidents of the Hbsa, along with my counterparts, Joe and Francisca. Before the GSB, I worked in public policy in Texas for about 6 years. And I guess my favorite thing about the GSB, again, the people answer is so trite, but one thing specifically about the people that I really like that I always try to bring up on these calls is just the incredible willingness for people to go out of their way to help you. And I feel like at other schools, I've always heard there's like a bit of competitiveness in terms of full-time recruiting or trying to find internships. But the GSB, it's quite the opposite. I have found that, especially for people who come here looking to do a career pivot, the wealth of resources from your classmates is incredible. And people truly do go out of their way to ensure that you are prepared for interviews that you may have no expertise within. They help you source companies. They introduce you to people. They open their networks. So it's incredibly supportive in the fact that a lot of people come here to again change careers, and your classmates are incredibly helpful in helping you do so.
I'll go now.
Sorry, I guess yeah, like I'll go into the last person, Isa.
Um, I'm Isabel or Isa. I was born and raised in Quito, Ecuador. So I'm an international student. That's where my family's at. Um, my connection to Hbsa is that this is a community that I hold near and dear to my heart, and that has been a source of a lot of support for me. Um, Favorite thing about the GSB, I was gonna say the people and the trees, because the trees here are also so beautiful. But I'm gonna do a deeper dive into the people. Just I live with 4 other GSBers, and the conversations over dinner are where I've learned and grown the most. And I think I answered all the questions.
You did. Thank you so much. So these are our panelists today. For those of you who are trickling in, we're a group of MBA 1 and 2s who are all in some way part of the Hispanic Business Student Association. And so really quickly, the Hbsa, as we call it, is a student identity organization. So we put on different kinds of events to bring the community together. We also do kind of like advocacy for getting more Hispanic students into the GSB. We also host an annual alumni banquet honoring distinguished Hispanic alumni. Last year, we celebrated Billy Alvarado, who's the CFO of Stripe. And so that's a really nice way of bringing in alumni and current students together. And yeah, generally, we just try to foster kind of a sense of community. So today, what we thought we would do on this panel is first kick it off with some misconceptions that we commonly hear from students about the GSB. So we'll do this for about 10 minutes, and then we'll bounce over to you all for any kind of questions. We're here to be honest and open, so get your questions ready, and we're excited to answer them. So I guess just to start, I know there's a lot of different things that are out there about the GSB on the forums, on different things. I'd love to kick it off over to Isa to talk a little bit about the misconception around academics at the GSB that we've commonly heard.
Yeah, I had a conversation with Joe about this actually, and I really like the phrase he used that the GSB is kind of a choose your own adventure kind of scenario, and the adventure that I've chosen is one of like prioritizing academics. I'm a non-traditional student. I was working as a teacher before coming to the GSB. I studied philosophy. Like I really want to learn finance and accounting and operations. Like these are the skills that I didn't learn in the workplace. I didn't learn in my undergrad. So this is what I'm prioritizing in my time here and getting the most out of stellar faculty. For other of my peers, they've learned a lot of the skills that we're learning in class already in their workplace, and maybe they are prioritizing a very vibrant social life or really the professional side of things. So I'd say that that's a misconception that I want to break, is that people don't care about academics here.
Thank you, Isa. I think the second misconception we want to talk about was a kind of like this maybe elitist culture that it seems like GSB gives off, where it's hard to connect to people during the application process or beyond. And I wanted Omar to talk a little bit about this.
Sure thing. That's a great question. So I think the admissions team has done a fantastic job recently, kind of demystifying the process of what goes into the admissions process and getting admittance into the GSB. That being said, whenever you look at the class statistics, there's roughly 90 U.S. institutions of higher ed, plus give or take another 50 from around the world that of people that studied at these institutions that come here. So I think in the end of the day, it's about why are you a good fit here, rather more than just being, hey, you have this very like elite profile, and this is why you should be getting accepted into the GSB. I think in the end of the day, what matters most is who you are, what are you bringing to the table, and being a decent fit. That being said, I think as far as who to reach out to and things like that, most GSBers are always open and welcoming to speaking with people. I think in the end of the day, what's important there is to have a good reason why you want to connect with that specific person and to come prepared as well, right? I mean, they're also taking time out of their schedules to chat with you. So in that sense, you want to make sure you come prepared and you know why that specific person is someone you want to talk to.
Thank you, Omar. And along the same lines, Frank, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about what it takes to get into the GSB and kind of misconceptions around that.
Yeah. I think that now having been here for a year and a half or so, I do think that people develop this idea, and I guess that the acceptance rate probably exacerbates this a little bit, but develop this idea to be like some incredible superstar to get in here. And I actually find that's not the case. Of course, everyone here is incredibly impressive and incredibly smart and engaging. Um, but what I think really defines the people here, more so than the fact that they start a billion-dollar company, which most people have not, is their one, I think, ability to engage in meaningful self-reflection to the point that they understand their weaknesses and their faults as well as their strengths, and that self-reflection comes through in their applications. And two, that they've just done very well and are able to articulate what they've been able to do in sometimes ordinary jobs. And so, if you come from kind of, pretty standard background, for instance, even if you feel like, oh, I don't have the right name brand, whatever, there are tons of people who come from a broad, kind of diverse backgrounds from a ton of different companies, many of whom I think may not fit the traditional GSB mold, but for whom they are able to articulate again kind of how they've shined within their job, how they've made change or value within the companies that they've worked, or organizations in which they've worked. I mean, people on this call, for instance, Isa as a teacher, I worked in public policy. I mean, there's just not a standard fare student. And in terms of the essay, I think that the thing that when I talk to folks about their applications that I try to stress most is just, of course, you want to toot your own horn to some degree. You want to trumpet your accomplishments, but I would say as importantly, if not more importantly, is that you should be able to, again, articulate how the GSB fits into your personal growth. And part of that comes from also recognizing, again, where the gaps are in your personal growth. And so if you feel like you need to improve your managerial aptitude along any number of lines, articulate how that's the case, how the GSB fits into that mold. And I think that Kirsten Moss and the other admissions staff like to see that their applicants are reflective, they're vulnerable, they think about themselves and their accomplishments, and they have a kind of a reasonably articulated path for the future and how the GSB fits into that path.
I love that. More talking about like the journey that you're on rather than like you being a finished product. Thanks, Frank. I think the last misconception, at least I hear a lot, is what matters most to you essay. And I know Will led a panel on the essay piece. But I think like a lot of times, like it's kind of this crazy thing that you have to write, maybe make people cry, like have it be this kind of emotional thing. And I'd love for each of the panelists to kind of go through and talk about kind of what they wrote about in their essay and what they think about how any advice they would give on writing that one. I think I can kick this off and just say that I think being honest and genuine and true to yourself as you write it, even though that seems really hard, I think it's kind of like what is in your gut, like what does your gut tell you to write? And for me, that was really touching on inequality. So I grew up moving around Latin America and the US, and I was like very fortunate in how I grew up. And so I talked a lot about how that perspective has shaped kind of the work that I've done in international development since then. And it felt like I read it, I read it yesterday in preparation for this, and I felt like it was still true to me a year later. And I think that's a good marker for how you might write it. I'll pass it over to Omar, if you could share a little bit about your essay and just kind of any advice you have about that.
Sure thing. So my essay of what matters or what mattered and what still matters most to me is about living a balanced life. I went ahead and talked about these 5 principles that I live my life by, which include family, friends, faith, fitness, and then finance, which is kind of like your job, right? Your professional life. And I talked about how I balance all of these throughout my life and like why that matters to me. So again, in the end of the day, I don't think anyone's read this and thought this is the most touching thing I've ever read and started crying and you know, published it and sent it to a ton of people, but I think it was genuine, and it was like, this is who I am, and this is like, and this is how the GSB also like fits that mold, and why I'm interested in coming here. So I think my advice there, again, similar to what I think everyone else is going to say and touch on, is just to be honest and be yourself. I'll pass it over to Joe this time.
You were the popcorn E, now you're the popcorn or, back and forth between us, Omar. So yeah, I guess my first thought on the essay is like, I sort of contextualize it when I went to UCLA for undergrad. Go Bruins, if there's any UCLA people here. And I do a lot of work with undergrads. And when you're thinking about the essay as part of like an MBA application, I generally like to think of it as part of, like you have years of, professional, academic, personal growth and experience that you've done. You have, years of, other types of things that are being part of. So the essay is just one part of your overall application. So I think it's really important to contextualize that, to not sort of, over-index on that to the extent that, sort of causes other considerations there. But to answer the question specifically, what I wrote for my essay, I wrote about really being involved. I had a career before in finance and working with startups. And I wrote about how I really wanted to start a business that was, a little bit more sort of like social impact oriented, as opposed to just specifically being sort of a for-profit entity. So you could think of it from an econ standpoint as having sort of positive externalities in the world. And I feel really fortunate. That's sort of what I'm spending a lot of my time doing right now with different startups. And I think the GSB helped me get there. So it reflected back on the essay, and I was like, oh, Joe, a few years back writing this essay, would be really happy with, sort of where I am right now and how GSB's helped me get there. And I guess on that note, I will popcorn over to Isa.
My essay was on lifting people's stories as a way to bring about social change. So I wrote about helping high school students write their Common App essays and tell their life story in that way. A dance I did with dining service staff in college. So nothing like game changing or like large in a particular sense, but I think it really captured my values. And the advice that I give high school students when I help them apply and write Common App essays for college is to just like lean into the reflectiveness that this opportunity to apply to schools gives you. And to like, even if things don't work out the way you're expecting, just the act of telling your life story and reflecting on what matters most to you is really valuable. And it's something that I try to do once every couple of years. Francisco.
Yes, I wrote my essay. So I co-founded the organization that I work for prior to coming here, and I wrote my essay about a couple of things. I talked about kind of how I saw public policy and politics as one of, if not, in my opinion, the most important framework by which you can kind of change people's lives in a meaningful generational way. And then the second was how I wasn't a very good manager. Like I had staff and I don't think I was a particularly good boss. And I talked a little bit about like how I came to that conclusion and how I, was going through a period of growth and Kristen Moss, like she writes, if once you're accepted, she writes you a little handwritten note on your application, and she on your your acceptance letter, and she referenced that and like talked about how she hoped that the GSB could provide kind of the framework for growth that I was looking for. So that's just why I continue to stress the idea that I think that they're looking for some self-reflection in your essays, and that you don't have to be this like perfect package when you're applying, and you should be open about that.
Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. As you can see, wide range of things, but all kind of very introspective and looking at kind of deeper values and like how people see the world. We'll transition over to questions now, and feel free to, I know Will is answering a few more like tactical questions in the Q&A box. Feel free to send any kind of questions, and we're really here to talk about the student experience and anything that you have around there. But I guess I'll start us off with a question for anyone on the panel is, could you guys describe what the community, the GSB Latinx community is like?
It's a group that is very diverse. You have people that are like me, international students that grew up in Latin America. You have people that are first generation, second generation children of immigrants. And it's also very lively in different ways. Like some people like organizing large events and lots of dancing, and other people are more like Francisca and me, which is small dinners and board games. Um, I think something that I'm hoping that I can contribute my grain of sand is to increase the number of Latinos that are children of immigrants and that actually don't have a life story like mine. I think that there might be an overrepresentation of Latinos that went to private schools that taught them English from a very young age and that were prepared for perhaps not Stanford Business School, but at least good schools. And I think that there could be more diversity in terms of the stories. Just more representation is always better. But that's how I would describe this community.
Yeah, I think that I think that's exactly right. I think that to kind of articulate a point that Isa made was that I think that we try to be a big tent, and recognizing that that it being Latino. I mean, Latinos are not a monolith, as everyone talking about from the election, of course, and that there is an opportunity to create community out of sometimes very different cultures and backgrounds. So I think that we try to be as inclusive as possible. I think that even folks that just have an interest in Latin America or in Latino culture, I think we try to engage as much as possible. So it's a supportive community. I think it's a close knit one, and yeah, we're all friends.
Yes.
I could maybe add on just from an MBA one's perspective really quickly. So coming to the GSB at the very beginning of the quarter, you go through something called the academic adjustment period, where no club can reach out to you. You can't do any recruiting, etc. It's just so you can adjust, obviously, to being a student again. But quickly after that ended, I mean, we had people from the community reaching out to me directly and to fellow MBA ones, and I think that speaks volumes to how they want to kind of just like propagate this culture of inclusivity and just of having like some sort of just building these warm relationships out. So again, only been here for a few months, right, and just getting started. But even in that short amount of time, I'm already feeling that sense of community.
Thank you, Omar. Awesome. So we have a few questions coming in from the audience. I'll take Daniel Serrano's question, and maybe Joe and Frank could help with this. Can you share a little bit more about the programming HBSA puts on? Are there any types of career support in addition to providing community?
Yeah, I'll go first on that, and then I'm sure Frank will have things to add. I think that it's in these extraordinary, unprecedented times, it's difficult sometimes to think about sort of what the community looks like during COVID. I can say we've been very intentional this year about sort of setting Zoom events, socially distant outdoor, sort of those types of activities actually are sort of disallowed right now by Stanford. So the extent to which people are sort of comfortable meeting casually, comfortably in a way that everyone feels safe is okay, but it's been somewhat difficult with the sort of current virus situation to do a lot of sort of very serious programming. Historically, in the past, we've had such things as sort of a weekend retreat offsite wherever. For at least for me, that was a huge part of really feeling like the bonding and the relationship, and really feeling like HBSA was sort of like my home and community of people was spending the weekend together. So I love that. And as I think Francisca mentioned earlier, we normally do sort of like an HBSA dinner and gala type event where we have a speaker come in. So there's a lot of, and then normally throughout the year, there's such things as, an initiative we're starting this year, something called the HBSA Familias, which is a concept of a group of, sort of like MBA 2s and MBA 1s working together to sort of say, okay, hey, how can the MBA 2s support the MBA 1s academically, professionally, emotionally during the process, because we've lived through it. And then, also just sort of additionally building community. Now, to answer the other question about professional resources, I think that that's there are a lot of professional resources available. I think there's, some of it's sort of a little bit more ad hoc, the MBA ones asking MBA twos, specific questions. You'll see a lot of that throughout Stanford. As I can't remember who'd mentioned this point earlier, this idea of, you can really just reach out to anybody in your class or who's currently at GSB. And if they've worked at a job or worked with someone who you'd like to talk to, they're going to, go out of their way to make sure you can do that. And so the same is true with Hbsa students. And then there are, additional Hbsa specific resources. Company will reach out to the CMC, the Career Management Center, and say, hey, we're looking specifically to hire, insert group. And sometimes that's someone, from a Latin background. And then those will come directly to us through Hbsa. So there's some specific job opportunities that sense. So high level, I think there's a lot happening both with the sort of, interpersonal community standpoint and from the professional standpoint. Things are a little bit different this year, maybe because of COVID, but overall, that's, very robust focus on sort of building community, both from, sort of a friend standpoint and from a career standpoint.
Thanks, Joe. Anything to add, Frank?
No, I think that Joe pretty much summed it up. But yeah, we have banquets, we have parties, we have events, we have small get-togethers. Obviously, COVID's changed things a little bit, but I still think that I at least try to do one-on-one meetups with MBA ones as much as I can. So it's ad hoc. And in terms of the career resources, I think that one thing that is an incredible boon here is that I think that the Latino alums are incredibly responsive, and this is it's across the board. Actually, I mean, every I have never had an alum not respond to a message from me. They may not give you everything that you want, but they will always answer the email. And I think the Latino alums are especially diligent in doing that as well.
Awesome.
I can share an example of how the community can support each other with jobs. So I really wanted to learn more about Sesame Workshop because I really like Sesame Street and I wanted to work in that over the summer. And then Francisco's wife, like her cousin, is Nina la Latina, like the character. So then Francisco's wife just introduced me to her, and that was like really insightful. And that's the kind of like connections that really drive the world forward. And I'm very happy to have this community to help me out when I want to work for Sesame Street.
Amazing. Thank you, everyone. I'll just take a quick second to answer a question from Dee about working with companies or governments in Latin America, whether through Hbsa or otherwise. So there's actually a career focus group called LASA, Latin American Student Association, that really focuses on bringing in people from Latin America and kind of fostering and facilitating connections there. GSB has a crazy amount of alumni across Latin America. I think they actually just hosted a panel on philanthropy and I think VC on Monday from really prominent Latin American people. And so there's a lot going on there. Another question that came from Rodolfo was, can you talk about the interactions with professors and alumni outside the classroom?
I can go. So both of them have been extremely positive. And I would say almost surprisingly, just people have been surprisingly receptive and responsive. So I'll start off with reaching out to alumni. So I've been trying to pivot into an industry that I don't have experience in. And that being said, I've started doing some networking and started reaching out to people. And it's been just extremely positive results so far. Every single time I reach out to someone, they respond. And I've already had a few phone calls, and even during these COVID times when people might not know what's going on with either their firm or what's going on in the industry, they still want to talk to you, they still want to help you out, and that's something that's reflected really well on the GSB community and on the alumni community. So I'm pretty sure everyone else can speak to that, but at least it's been my experience in the short 2 months that I've been here that it's been very positive, and I look forward to continuing that on. And then as far as professors go, that's a really good question, especially I came from a large public university where I just walked into class, I sat down, I took notes sometimes, and then I just went back to my house and I would study or whatever, right? And here it's very different. You're an adult now and you're treated as such. And having said that, a lot of these professors, they're willing and wanting to talk to you. They even set up little like office hours outside of class for you to go talk to them, and they have amazing experience. Like some of these professors have founded companies, so they've already done things that you want to do, and they're very willing and wanting to speak with you. So that being said, it's amazing. It's very different from what I've done in the past and from what I've seen in the past, and I'm very much looking forward to just to like forming these relationships with professors going forward. Yeah.
My favorite HBSA alumni story, I totally forgot her name, but I think she was like president of HBSA when she was at Stanford, and she created this like racial justice alumni get together over the summer when the Black Lives Matter movement was top of mind for everybody. And it was just such an incredible thing that was very organic. And there were these breakout rooms, and you'd meet alumni. And there were alumni from all identity groups, but it was led by this particular woman. And just that sense of like we're here to learn from each other and to support each other as we try to lead positive change in our communities and in this range of workplaces was very encouraging to me. And in terms of faculty, something that I was not expecting was with this transition to Zoom classes, some professors wanted to run pilots and test if their classes were going well or not. And that's just so cool. Like there's this professor called Deborah Gruenfeld, who I think is incredible. And she wanted students to help her see if the class was running well or not. So I like signed up for all the pilots, and that level of like getting to see like the creator of power in social psychology, like one-on-one several times and give her feedback on what's working is very unique to small schools.
Yeah, and one more thing on the faculty side is, the professors and the lecturers here, they really are resources, and I think the reason why they come back here and spend, their extremely valuable time, I'm sure a very low hourly rate teaching us, is because they want to give back to the school. And as an example, I came to school wanting to try real estate, so I took the real estate class in the winter. It's a big real estate class that's offered. It's kind of a hallmark of the GSB if you're interested in real estate. And the two professors or the two lecturers are guys named Chris Mahold, whose son is in our class, and then a guy named Doug Abbey. Doug Abbey, I mean, they both have founded massive real estate investment funds, and Doug Abbey is one of the founders of Prologis, which is like pulling up the ticker here. It's a $75 billion REIT. And I email them quite literally all the time, and every single time I email them, they get back to me within like 25 minutes. It's actually astounding. I don't know how they respond so quickly. They're also, especially given their age. Anyway, I say all of that because as I was considering kind of opportunities for the summer in the real estate space, I would constantly kind of volley ideas at them, and they would always provide feedback for me as to like, do they know the firm? Do they know the people? Could they do some vetting for me? And now in the process of doing something like Startup Garage, in which we're working in the real estate space, they have been eager participants in our interviews. We sit them down for sometimes hours at a time and ask them questions, and they will always answer and introduce us to more people. So again, they kind of, the lecturers and professors here kind of offer back what you ask of them, but they're extremely helpful if you go to your way.
Amazing. Thanks everyone for sharing. Definitely like a wide range of interactions there. So there's a couple of questions from Marichui. The first was your biggest fear coming to GSB and how you faced it. The second one I think was interrelated or potentially is like, as a Latina, how welcome do you feel in classes or programs? Like, do you feel out of place at all? And anyone can answer.
I'll hop in. So I think a big fear I had coming to GSB. So when I started, I was a little bit on the younger end, and so I think there was some sort of like concerns about not necessarily being included in social things from a social standpoint because of age. What I found was really nice about GSB is like I think everyone just sort of thinks of each other, whether you're one of the youngest students or one of the oldest students in the class. Everyone just thinks of each other as peers. So for me, the sort of age concern I had was, evaporated even before I started at some of the admitted students events. So that was really, really nice for me. And I definitely enjoyed that. And Francisco, what was the second part of like we as Hispanic students feel comfortable and welcome in the community?
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely, I don't think I've ever experienced anything other than people feeling, really interested in and I think I have a, perspective of someone who's, my name's Joseph Walters. Oftentimes people don't know that I, identify as Latino or know anything about my mom's side of the family unless I bring it up. And it's normally something that people are very interested in and would like to learn more about. And I think it, is a conversation starter more than anything else. So those are the fear and then the welcomeness.
I can jump in and answer really quick. So this wasn't my personal experience, but I've definitely heard from a few like Latina friends who have said that they've experienced some kind of microaggressions on campus, and I just want to point this out because I think it happens anywhere. It definitely happens at the GSB, and I think particularly with the murder of George Floyd this summer, I think there has been a lot of conversation around Black Lives Matter and also just generally about underrepresented minorities at the GSB and how we can kind of decrease the burden that people face at the GSB and also get more people into the GSB. I know there's a question from Charlie Yates on the GSB action plan and like how much that's actually working to get more like staff and student and faculty that's more diverse into the GSB. And I think it's still kind of early days for that. But I just want to flag like there are issues. I think people do experience things. The GSB's culture is like uniquely focused on feedback, and so I think like a lot of times people do like have these conversations. But I'll open up to the panel in case anyone else has thoughts on that.
I'll echo a lot of what both Joe and Francisca have said. So having just gotten here, the majority of the time, I mean, if not the entire time, I felt like it's been a very inclusive environment where everyone is mostly interested in finding out more about you. Like everyone's so excited to meet one another. It's like, oh my gosh, you're Hispanic. Amazing. Tell me more about it. Like that every time you're so and so, like, can I please hear more about it? So for me in my time here, it's been nothing but positive and inclusive. One of the things that I will say about Francisca's comment is I have heard from a few other people comments of, "Hey, I've experienced a microaggression here or there." One of the things that I think is important to note is that a lot of time that comes from a place of ignorance, right? It's not necessarily in any way that they're trying to hurt you or anything like that. It's just they don't know better. And to the point of the GSB culture focusing a lot on feedback and constructive feedback. I mean, in vulnerability, I think it's a great place for you to put yourself in a vulnerable position and let them know, give them the feedback. Hey, by the way, when you said so and so, it made me feel this way. And then I promise you, everyone will autocorrect after that. So those are some of the key points I wanted to touch on.
Thank you, Omar.
An area that I've been thinking of, particularly around my role, is what happens when it's international Latinos that say microaggressions towards first gen, second gen like Latinos. Because I've seen it where there's comments like, "Oh, you're not really Latino, you don't speak Spanish," and it just a lack of acknowledgement of the diversity that is within our community. And maybe ways in which I can speak up a little bit more and try to share more that there are very different stories and that not speaking Spanish does not invalidate your identity as a Latino. Heck, Brazil doesn't speak Spanish and it's more than half of Latin America. It's definitely something that I see as an area where we can grow as a community.
Thank you, Isa. We'll take it to a broader question from Diego Flores. How has the GSB experience influenced your point of view on what to do after your MBA?
I can come in a little bit.
Let's hear it.
I really like the question around what's your fear. So I'm going to touch into it a little bit. I think one of my fears was that I was going to be like a cultural anomaly because I'd heard all these stories about business school and it sounded like a dangerous place for someone who was like a social justice warrior in college. And that was definitely not the case. I found community, but I think it also helped me. It challenged some of the stereotypes that I held about business and expanded my understanding of what are professional paths. And it exposed me to stories of people that are doing really good work within companies, within the private sector. And also the fact that life is long. I guess I'm also on the younger side, Joe. And I think especially like in my younger years, just this idealism of wanting to make change right now, and then realizing that a lot of the people that have made really impactful change sometimes go through more traditional established paths and learn a lot. Like I think I've started to think of consulting as a potential path for me, and that was not something that I had ever even considered or understood well. So I think that's how it's expanded my understanding of professional paths.
One other note I'll just emphasize, I think everything Isa said was spot on. And one thing that was really interesting for me is I feel like, you learn a lot from the professors who are here, but you also learn so much from your classmates and colleagues in terms of, careers they've had, roles that they've had, companies they've worked at that might not have even been on your radar. And sort of that whole path has been really valuable for me in understanding of, okay, these are people who've, been in, insert job at insert company and insert sector. And that, gives you a lot of information. Then you get, really candid responses. It's one of your friends, maybe you're just talking over dinner, and a lot of it, you're just interested in the person and you're learning a lot about them and it's fun, you're building a relationship. And then after, you reflect on it a little bit and you're like, oh, wow, I learned so much about, a specific job, a specific role, a specific company. So that's something that's been really, really interesting for me. And I would sort of call it like, just like learning through osmosis from being around a bunch of, really smart, energetic, motivated people who are willing to share their stories with you.
I love that, Joe. Yeah, I definitely have learned a lot. And I can answer really quickly. I kind of came into the GSB being like, I want to focus on emerging market tech. And then when I got here, I went to every single like background lunch, which is like when companies come in during lunchtime and they tell you. I went to a million different things. I was really interested in autonomous vehicles. I was really interested in kind of different technology and different like approaches. I thought about going to the nonprofit sector. And then now I'm like back into like focusing on emerging market tech because that's kind of like what the path I was on. And I really got to explore and I got to see different things. I also had a lot of time with the career coaches where they were like, listen, you're not really into consulting. And they kind of like played stuff back to me. So, everybody's journey is different and maybe you show up like and end up somewhere completely different, or maybe you just end up exactly on the path that you're on, but there's a lot of like resources along the way. Cool. Let's see. Okay. So there's a question about entrepreneurship. So can you mention any resources that GSB, including the student body community, provide to support entrepreneurial ventures? There is a lot. So maybe anyone in the audience or in the panel who has like specific experience with some of those.
Yeah, yeah, there's Stanford, I think, really prides, but the GSB and the university really prides itself on graduating a lot of entrepreneurs, both immediately after graduation and after the fact. So not only are there a litany of classes that provide overviews and kind of deep dives into everything from VC to kind of to startup operations to the ins and outs of kind of a term sheet to how to hire and how to kind of organize a sales force and an original HR team, everything, all the above. There's also kind of quasi-practical classes that you can take, ranging from Lean Launchpad, which is kind of the lean model of a startup, and then there's Startup Garage, which I'm in this quarter, which is kind of it's supposed to be like a design thinking focused course on starting a business, in which you start with a lot of interviews and then move into business prototype and design. You can also, and the important thing to note that I didn't really know before I came here was there's you can take, as a GSB student, you can take classes across the street. We call it across the street, which means that you can take classes at basically any department within the broader university. And so if you want to learn how to, build a video game, you can take video game design in the computer science department. If you want to take classes in design school to help kind of focus your vision and your design thinking process, you can take classes at design school. You can take classes wherever you want to. If you're interested in energy and alternative vehicles, you can take classes in engineering. You can do all kinds of stuff. So not only is there just a strong thread of entrepreneurship among your classmates, many of whom kind of come here with visions of starting a business, either immediately after graduation or sometime in the future, but also I think the school really goes out of its way to give you the resources to hopefully be successful. The other thing that I'm forgetting is Venture Studio. There's something called the Stanford Venture Studio, which provides a ton of resources, financial and otherwise, to help get your business off the ground. Gives you office hours with VCs, with lawyers, with accountants, with anyone you can imagine. So there's quite a few resources. I'll also mention that I'm one of the presidents of the Entrepreneur Club. So we also have a club.
Francisco's the president of like 12 million clubs. So, Isa.
No, I was just going to say flex.
Yeah, I think for those of you, there's a lot of people who come in like knowing they want to do entrepreneurship. I wasn't sure, and I got funding this summer to like try out an idea that I had around older adults and technology. And so I think like if you're entrepreneurship curious, it's definitely a good place for that too. Cool. So there is some talk about dual degrees. Joe, specifically, can you talk about, and I don't have anyone else, I think Isa is also doing a dual degree, and I don't know about Frank. Talk about your experience doing a dual degree. And they said like application, class workload, anything like that, managing your time.
Sure. And not to get too technical on you, I'll put my law hat on for a second. There's a difference between there's joint degrees and then there are dual degrees. So those in and of themselves, there's many variations there, Francisco, but some of them, so you can do, I think GSB does a really good job, frankly, of integrating across different departments and also across different schools. There's quite a few people in our class who are, doing a joint degree with, for example, Harvard Kennedy School, which is the School of Public Policy over at Harvard, people doing programs with the Woodrow Wilson School over at Princeton, and there are a lot of those types of things as well. So you don't necessarily need to be all Stanford. I'm admittedly biased, and I chose to do my joint degree with the Stanford Law School as opposed to a different law school. But I've really enjoyed it. I think that, because every program at Stanford is on the quarter system, it's pretty easy to integrate your, joint degree or dual degree classes. And so that's been something that's been really nice. I mean, for example, this quarter I'm in law school classes and GSB classes. Now, admittedly, if it weren't COVID, I'd probably have to be maybe running back and forth between the schools a little bit. Now I just sort of close one Zoom window and open a different Zoom window. So it actually makes it pretty easy for me, at least for this quarter. I feel very supported by GSB. There's, they have they call us MBA pluses, which means that we're an MBA plus some other sort of degree, and they have specific academic advisors for us related to making sure that, not just that we're on track with everything related to GSB, but we're on track with everything related to these other joint degree programs. So I often have found that my advisor at GSB knows more about what I need to do for the law school than sometimes my law school advisor does. So that's been really nice. And I do feel very, very supported at GSB with the joint degree that I'm doing. And that's everything from academics to career to, personal stuff. And there's also, sort of clubs for joint degree students. And I also just will randomly tack on here because I saw in the questions, there was a question about sort of integration with different Latin groups across Stanford, and I know there are similar groups. So I'm involved in. There's the Stanford Latinx Law Students Association. Our acronym is SALSA, which I've always loved. And we, like last year and 2 years ago, we've done events with SALSA, and there's other groups, with the med school and those sorts of things. So I think there's a lot of professional school, relationship building as well. So those are my high level thoughts.
I'm a dual degree with the education school here at Stanford too. There's around 30 of us. We call each other Mamba. And I think it's been an awesome way to meet people that are quite different from the business school students. Like it's a very different community with very different interests. And it's helped me kind of grow just who I interact with. And especially the community of 30 dual degrees. We did like a hike 2 weekends ago, and it's been a great source of support as we tend to share an interest in a sector that isn't always as profitable as the more traditional business school sectors.
Thanks, Isa. Thanks, Joe. Good to get a lot of different perspectives. So I know we have a lot of questions in the chat. And it's going to be tough to get to them. So we'll take one more from Marie-Julie, again, on financing your MBA program. So if anyone has any thoughts there, because I know that's top of mind for a lot of people. For all of those other people with questions that we haven't answered, we'll post our general Hbsa email that you can reach out to. We can provide more tactical answers there. But yeah, does anyone have any thoughts for Marie-Julie? And then we'll transition to the close.
So I just laughed a little bit when you brought that up, Francisca, because I try to actively avoid my thinking about my student loan debt that I'm incurring while I'm here. I think that there's a large percentage of people at GSB. Some people are fortunate and have financial resources to not do that. I'm not one of them. I have a lot of debt that's involved here. I think that what is nice about GSB is there's a lot of really smart academic, business-oriented people who are going to help you figure out the best possible resources to get the best possible deals on your loans. There's entire Slack channels we have dedicated to people who are on financial aid and where you're getting loans from and the best deals and collaborations and those sorts of things you can do. So you're definitely going to get some of the best insights and financial resources. But at the end of the day, your tuition bill is going to hit you, and you're going to have to pay for it one way or another. So that does exist. I would just say, as someone who basically had a pretty large, potential amount of debt to take on to come here, you can fund that in a few different ways. In addition, I mean, Stanford's financial aid office is, very, I think they do a very good job of understanding your specific situation and saying, okay, what are the resources you have available? How much can we help you related to that? And, so some of that will be funded. Oftentimes, if you don't have, financial resources, some of it will be provided by Stanford. Some of it is loans, but you also there's during the summer you're going to be commanding sort of an MBA salary during the summer, so it's for a lot of people substantially more on sort of a weekly or monthly basis than they were making before, and then afterwards you're going to have a post MBA job that is going to helpfully. So I think that while there are sort of like financial considerations sort of taken together, I think that it was much more of a sort of better financial investment than I was sort of even expecting it to be when I'm looking at it where I am now versus where I had originally started coming in.
I would also add to just be on the lookout for scholarships as well. The Hispanic Scholarship Fund, they give out scholarships. Luna Cap Foundation, those are for either former military or Mexican American. And then there's like I think Paul Soros Scholarship, and that's for first generation Americans as well. Those are three that I can just think of off the top of my head. There's probably many more out there, but just obviously financing the MBA is important, and just be on the lookout for other scholarship opportunities.
Awesome. Thanks, Omar. Thanks, Joe. We'll just wrap it up here. Thank you so much to everyone for attending. I'm going to ask the panel for kind of rapid fire words of wisdom for our attendees. And I put the email you can reach out to. I'm not promising an immediate reply, but we'll try to get to you as soon as possible. Anyways, words of wisdom, and thank you again for attending. And I'll pass it to Francisco.
Yeah, I've said it 1,000 times, but don't feel like you need to like blow the socks off of admissions. I think that if you can just articulate some of your accomplishments, even if your job doesn't seem like the most outstanding job in the world, just accomplishments that you've made, how you've made an impact, how you hope to make an impact in the future, and then some self-reflection about how you hope to grow as a person and what the GSB can provide for you. Oh, right. Isa, go.
My words of wisdom would be, what school you end up going to does not determine your self-worth. I'll pass it to Omar.
So words of wisdom as far as application process goes, just reflect and put together maybe the most compelling story about who you are, and I think that'll get you where you need to be. Sorry, I'll pass it over to Joe.
Thanks for that, Omar. Yeah, I guess specifically on the application process, my one big piece of advice is the extent to which there are, people who know you well that you can, ask them and get sort of feedback from a lot of people. I know sometimes there's a sort of tendency to get a lot in your own head about the application process. I know that was true for me. So whether it's like thinking out ideas aloud with people, having people review your resume, whatever type things, I think that getting other people who know, love, and trust in the process, it's going to be, one, supportive for you, and two, is going to ultimately probably have you come out with the best work product.
I love all this advice, and I would add that think of this as a life check-in for yourself. So whether or not you actually end up attending business school, figure out if you're on the right track to where your goals are. You don't need, maybe you need business school, maybe you don't. It's a good time for life reflection and something really valuable you can get out of it, regardless of like what acceptance letters come in at the end of the day. Anyways, thank you so much to our panelists for their time, and thank you all for your curiosity and your interest, and we hope to hear from you. Take care and stay safe out there.
And with that, thank you so much for attending this session. We hope to see you throughout the week. Thank you to our panelists, and thank you to all of our attendees. Go out there, stay safe, be inspired, and hope to see you soon.